Welcome, everybody, to this season finale of Album Swap. I was bad at recommending albums and lost season 1, so this is my punishment. To give a little bit of background for this album, Gorillaz at the time were a highly revered band, and still are. Demon Days is considered one of the best albums of the 2000s, and Plastic Beach is considered one of the best albums of the 2010s. So, Gorillaz is a very well-respected group, and for good reason too. Listen to Demon Days, listen to Plastic Beach. The production on those records is outstanding. There's lots of great themes, great songwriting throughout those records, and they're really good. After 7 years of just about nothing from the band Gorillaz comes Humanz, which is very much about the 2016 election in America, which is kind of an odd topic for Gorillaz to take on. In previous Gorillaz records, they mostly focused on things like pollution and climate change, which, while still being a part of our world and Gorillaz, their cartoon world, they can draw parallels between the two and create some very interesting metaphors. However, the 2016 election is something that's very literal and feels a bit odd coming from the Gorillaz perspective. And that being said, the themes of politics aren't even that consistent throughout the record. There are some songs here that are deal with it pretty heavily, such as Ascension by featuring Vince Staples, or
it's more like Vince Staples featuring Gorillaz production, to be honest.
Or Let Me Out with Pusha T and Mavis Staples. Again, mostly a Pusha T and Mavis Staples track, not really too much Gorillaz going on there. But we will get to that issue later. But there are a lot of times here where the theme of the album, and this tried to be a concept album. I think it failed as being a concept album just because the story is so inconsistent. If you look into it, the story is about, there's like a party at the end of the world, but the party sort of appears in a couple tracks and the interludes, but there's no consistent story. And I don't really understand how you're supposed to get that concept just by listening to the music.
This album doesn't feel like it has that much of a sense of progression. The idea is supposed to be like you're slowly going further into this like party, and eventually it gets to the point where they like confront the guy who's running it. There's not like a progression in terms of the music. Like it doesn't get like slowly like darker sounding or anything like that, because like the first track is really dark sounding. So like musically, there isn't really this progression that I think is present on other better concept albums.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's much easier to think about this album as a collection of tracks, and some of them have themes that are similar to others rather than a concept album, because, like I said before, I don't think it works as a concept album. And part of that is due to the inconsistency of the album. And I'd say inconsistency is probably one of this project's biggest downfalls. There's just such a range in quality of tracks, in the sound of tracks, in literally everything. There are some tracks here. I'll start with a highlight, like Andromeda. Andromeda is probably my favorite track off the album. It is certainly one of the highlights. It is one of the best produced. It is one where Damon Albarn's vocals feel like 2D's vocals, and they have actually a strong message, Andromeda being about losing loved ones, specifically Bobby Womack, who was a Gorillaz collaborator who died in 2014, sadly. Dram is featured on this track, although his feature is a bit toned down, which is a bit odd, but I think it still overall works as a song. But there are some other tracks. For example, definitely one of the low points is Sex Murder Party, which it's one of my least favorite tracks. Probably not my least favorite though. but the production on that track is just so uninspired and basic and doesn't even really sound that good. It sounds like something you would like whip up in GarageBand in like 5 minutes. And the features on that track they almost sound like they don't want to be there. There's almost no emotion. They're not giving great performances by any means. And it's so odd to hear these two tracks on like the same project and try and relate them in some way. Man, there's more problems with Sex Murder Party too, but we don't have to get into that. Another thing, I'm bouncing all around over the place, but as I was saying, the production sometimes on this record is just either bland or boring or sometimes bad, actually.
Oh yeah, I want to mention the track Moments.
Yes, I was going to go to Moments.
Because it has De La Soul featured on it, which, like, on Plastic Beach, like, Super Fast Jellyfish, that song's incredible. But on this record, but on Moments, you have the worst kick drum I have ever heard. It is so obnoxious sounding. It's insane. It's incredibly overbearing. It sounds blown out as fuck. And it's just, like, really overpowering in a way that, like, it gives you, like, a headache listening to.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Also on Moments, there's the bridge with Noodles vocals that are they're just pitched, like, way too high, and it totally clashes with everything else on the track. It's weird. Having the production be bad at points is really kind of jarring for a Gorillaz record, seeing as their track record in the past has been so good. And at times it feels like songs were just rushed. You can look into the actual production of this record and see that is not the case. And I just really don't know how this project ended up sounding like this. I do want to talk about, I guess, a couple highlights here, because while I'm not a fan of most of the tracks on this record, there are a couple that I do want to shout out. Like I said earlier, Andromeda. The record starts off on a good note with Ascension, I'd say, with Vince Staples. Again, we said this is really more of a Vince Staples track, but I mean, Vince Staples he's pretty good.
He has a very animated performance that works well with this, like, pretty weird alien sounding beat, essentially. And, like, I don't know, 2D is, like, there on, like, the hook, sort of. Not really.
2D and Gorillaz in general aren't really that present on this record. There are some songs, I believe they appear once every song, but sometimes they're just on, like, the bridge or in the background, or maybe they just have a chorus. The only tracks I'd say they're, like, very present on are Andromeda and Busted and Blue. And I guess we got The Power, the closer. But it's really odd just how the features are the ones just taking over this album. I think that also lends to the inconsistency of the record, because you're bringing in so many different artists, and all those artists have different sounds. Like Pevin Everett, who's a soul R&B house singer, sitting next to, like, Popcan, it's such a jarring transition, and it doesn't really make much sense. Again, it lends itself to inconsistency all over the record.
If I can jump in, I want to mention that, like, I guess I find this interesting, is that for me, a lot of the time, if I put on an individual song from Humanz, I actually, like, enjoy it. Like, I think it's decent a lot of the time. There's a lot of songs where if I just put it on its own, like Charger, or maybe something like She's My Caller, like, those songs, when I put them on their own, I think, oh, this is actually pretty good. I think, like, maybe I was too harsh on it. But then if I go back and listen to the record front to back, the way songs transition to each other and just having everything together, like, it brings all the songs down a lot. I don't know how to describe it, but it makes the songs on the album, songs that I like, they just turn into songs that I just don't enjoy. Like Charger specifically, when Charger comes right after Submission, I found that I really disliked it in the track listing. I thought it just did not work after Submission. And I think that's like, it's a weird thing with this album that I feel like the pacing or something should have been changed about the track listing, just because of how I just feel like the album is very poorly paced, and with how often I find myself not enjoying tracks, I think reordering the tracks could have helped the album.
I feel like Damon Albarn specifically chose this ordering to try and help convey the story, but again, I don't see how you could convey any story with a collection of tracks here. So maybe reordering the tracks in a way that makes them a bit more sonically in tune with one another, I think could have helped out this record quite a bit. But the way it is right now, it's just it's like you're just being whipped around from style and feature to another. It's rough. It's very rough, especially when this is all in sort of the framework of being a Gorillaz album. And a lot of the time, it does not sound like a Gorillaz album. There are songs here like Charger. Doesn't really sound like a Gorillaz song. Damon Albarn's vocals, they don't feel like 2D's vocals in the way that they do on previous albums. Which is, again, there's just some decisions that were made here that are just baffling.
Alright, my 3 favorite tracks, specifically the first 3 that I actually like, because I like Ascension. I think Ascension is probably my favorite track. I think it just works really well. Strobe Light, which is one of the few songs that I actually enjoy more, like, solely in the album, because I find when I listen to it outside of the album, I just get annoyed with it. It is a weird... The production on it is, like, weirdly inorganic feeling. I had it in, like, one of my playlists, and whenever it came on, I just found it annoying. And then Saturn's Bars, which I know you aren't that big a fan of, but, like, it has a very dark, like, kind of trap-inspired sound that I think actually works very well. Specifically, the parts with 2D's vocals. I think Popcan is a bit inconsistent on it. 2D's vocals on that track, I think, work incredibly well with the kind of vibe and atmosphere that it creates. And then the album is ruined because Moments happens, so...
yeah. For me, with Saturn's Bars, I think it's kind of a fine track. I just don't think Popcan really fits in with the production. But that's... Okay. One thing about the production, you go back and listen to a song like Empire Ants off of Plastic Beach, and just listen to, like, how lush the production on that track is. That is nowhere to be found on Humanz. Like I said before, it just doesn't feel like the proper time was put into some of these tracks to make them sound great. And I just don't know why. I guess I can talk about my least favorite track, which is most definitely Hallelujah Money. Hallelujah Money, the best way to describe it is it confuses me. I don't understand why. Nothing about the track works, in my opinion. It is one of the least Gorillaz-ish tracks here. It's like a soul track, but the production doesn't really fit with the...
Sorry, I'm re-listening to it as you're talking, and I'm like, you know what? Moments, you're pardoned. You're good. You have a new least favorite track. What the fuck actually were they thinking? I don't... Like, it's like a slow, weird gospel song, and then you have this trap beat awkwardly inserted into it towards the end, and it's like, what? This clashes so hard. It does not work at all. It sounds awkward as fuck. The next track after it also isn't very good.
We Got the Power. Okay, I think they were going for something on We Got the Power. It's at least an inspired track. I don't think it works out. I know that some people really like this track. I'm not a fan. But I can see how it's an inspiring and like uplifting end, I guess, to the album.
Yeah, it just like feels so cheesy.
It really does
Like
feel
it's
cheesy.
so like over the top and like uh
Yeah, this album just kind of fails on pretty much every front. The style of the album is not it's not there. It's inconsistent. The production is bad most of the time. The songwriting is also bad most of the time. And it's a confusing project, I think, all around. I don't see I don't see why you would make this project and release it. Like I know like David Albarn I'm sure was very passionate about it, but like I could not understand it. Like listening to it now, it's just like, oh man, it just needed more work.
yeah. I think we should also mention like I feel like there's a lot of tracks that have individual elements that are very good. That
Definitely
are just ruined. Like moments like De La Soul is pretty good on that track. The beat isn't, but De La Soul's good. And that's a lot of the album. There's times where like the features are like pretty good or the production's pretty good, but the other elements of the track just don't work. Yeah, like you were saying, if they took like another month and like fiddled with the production on these tracks or I don't know, scrapped some, I think it would have been much better.
I'd have to agree. Overall, I'm at like a 4 out of 10 on this album. Honestly, I used to enjoy it more. Over time, it's worn off on me a bit.
Yeah, I have to agree. This is like a 4 out of 10. I think it's just a very frustrating album. There are moments where there are actually interesting ideas presented, but
they're overshadowed by the faults, I'd say.
Well, everyone, that was Album Swap Season 1. We might have more. We're going to have a Halloween special of Album Swap coming soon. But for now, this type of Album Swap, I don't know.
Yeah, the regular episodes, I guess.
The regular episodes aren't going to be happening for a little while. While we try new stuff, and also while we have finals for school. That'll happen. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode of Album Swap, this finale, please leave a like, consider subscribing. We have plenty more episodes of Album Swap that you can binge watch if you want. And also check out our other series, Deep Dive into the Archive. We're going to have some cool new episodes of that coming out soon. Yeah, have a good day.